Welcome back. Well, it has been nearly 4 weeks since the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. The reward for any information has now doubled to $200,000 due to a monetary match from an anonymous donor. Investigators reportedly in contact now with Mexican authorities over the case. Of course, her home not far from the border. Fox News national correspondent Brian Yanis now live in Tucson, Arizona right now. Brian, good morning.
Maria, good morning. It is day 19 since Nancy Guthrie was taken from her Tucson home about 60 miles north of the U.S.-Mexico border. And we're now told that the FBI has been in contact with Mexican authorities about the Guthrie case. And while we're told that this is standard operating procedure for a case like this so close to the border, it is notable here that because it speaks to the wide net that has been cast in this investigation. Here's Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos, who spoke to us this week on whether they believe the 84-year-old is in Mexico.
Any suggestion at all that Nancy Guthrie might have been taken across the border into Mexico? Are you looking at that at all?
You know, I'm sure the FBI's looked into that as well, but no, I mean, we check all the leads we have. We're like everybody else. We know where Mexico is in relationship to this, and certainly it's a possibility, but no, we have nothing to indicate that.
Now, hundreds of federal and state investigators are working this case hard. There have been tens of thousands of tips called in. The sheriff says he remains optimistic as long as these tips keep coming in. Investigators continue to analyze partial DNA found in Guthrie's home belonging to an unknown person and male DNA found on a glove some 2 miles away from the home. Forensic scientists are using investigative genetic genealogy to try to find the suspect by identifying those with similar DNA, mapping out a family tree of relatives that could lead them back to their suspect, a process that could take weeks, even months.
Anyone on Earth that has DNA could be the suspect. And then as soon as you start doing additional DNA testing, you may learn the biological sex of the person. You may learn their biogeographical origins. You know, are they likely to be from the States? Are they likely to be international? And then you can continue to narrow in, you know, do they belong to a major family group? Can you find a relative? If you
They're also likely, Maria, to do what's called a familial DNA analysis. Arizona is one of just 16 states that allows this. Investigators can cross-check their DNA samples with a database of a state database that includes those who have been arrested or convicted of crimes here in the state. So bottom line is the reward has been doubled to over $200,000. They are encouraging people to keep calling in 1-800-CALL-FBI. Maria?
Well, it's just incredible, Brian, because the motive is a complete mystery. I mean, they didn't steal anything from her home. They're not getting any money. Why take an 84-year-old woman? What are law enforcement saying about a potential motive?
Yeah, that has been a real frustrating point in this investigation, is about that, because we have asked specifically as to whether or not they believe, especially to the sheriff, Chris Nanos, does he believe that this was some sort of botched burglary? And he says that this was a targeted kidnapping. And when pushed on whether or not something has been taken from the home, what was taken from the home, they would not say. He's not saying if anything was taken from the home. He's also not saying whether or not there was forced entry. But what we do know is that there was the droplets of blood outside of that door belonging to Nancy Guthrie. That was her DNA. So obviously she was taken out of that house, but they're not being specific as to what was taken inside other than Nancy and how this person got in.
And thanks so much. Great reporting. Brian Yanis this morning in Tucson. Joining me now is former FBI special agent and Fox News contributor Nicole Parker. Nicole, thanks so much for weighing in here. Same question for you. What is the FBI likely looking at in terms of a potential motive here, in your view, Nicole?
That's something that's of a very high priority and interest to them. But, Maria, it's virtually impossible for them to determine the motive when they don't even have a suspect. They don't have a subject. They allegedly don't even have a person of interest right now. And so until that is identified, then they're going to dig in deeper. But again, the common thoughts that come to law enforcement when you see something like this, it is very rare that a total stranger goes in and does a targeted attack of this sort. Is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No. And so the mindset of law enforcement from the beginning is that it was likely someone close to her in her inner circle that knew her very well. But I think it's important to note that, yes, the FBI is in touch with law enforcement in Mexico. We have assistant legal attaches based out of Mexico City, and that is what they do. They have very close relationships with law enforcement there. They are right there across the border. But Maria, one thing that we know for certain, that border is sealed tight because of President Trump. Under the former administration, I would be very concerned about that possibility. But under the Trump administration, they have got their eyes on that border so closely coming in or out of the United States. So again, is it possible that she was moved over the border? Yes. Is it probable? I would say probably not.
Great point.
Not probable.
Yeah.
But possible.
Yeah, great,
right. And that's,
point
again,
on
thanks
that,
to President
Nicole.
Trump.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. Our border is more secure, and we are more secure and safer because of President Trump.
Yeah.
And so, again, going back to some of the other things that they've been doing, I know that there was, word that polygraphs were being done at the sheriff's office. My understanding is that those were polygraphs of new hires. They were not related to the Nancy Guthrie case. The TMZ had received a 5th ransom email, I believe, and they were asking in that email for, payment in a currency not in Bitcoin, but in another form of cryptocurrency. Again, these are leads that the FBI has to treat seriously. Whether they are accurate, not a false flag, a hoax, it still takes law enforcement resources to do this. But Maria, I think the frustration that all Americans have right now is the lack of consistency. And as an investigator, you know that when you're doing a case, it's not only important to bring the subject into handcuffs and to return Nancy Guthrie, but you have to look at it from a legal process that when they are taken in, eventually they will be going into the court of law, likely to face the criminal justice system. And you have to make sure that your evidence is buttoned up tight. And I hate to say this, but this investigation has been bungled on many levels. Many law enforcement officers believe this, and that is going to be problematic when this person is brought into custody because, for example, look at the crime scene. It was wide open. They didn't even lock that crime scene down. It was open. A tainted crime scene, that's problematic. I think that the DNA not being sent immediately to Quantico and being sent to Florida, that probably wasn't the best investigative move. And I think the inconsistent statements by the sheriff, we all remember initially, the family was clear, and then the family wasn't clear, and then the family was clear. It's just an inconsistent statement that is very confusing, I think, not only to the American public, which this is of a huge interest to all Americans, and frankly, it's a world interest at this point, but it's confusing to law enforcement officers as well, because many people ask, how was the family cleared? What evidence came in that cleared the family? So again, this is where it comes down to the sheriff. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about potential ego, politics. You've got to set that aside when you're working these investigations. Everyone needs to be working together, all hands on deck. Many people have asked that the FBI take over the investigation. Right now, it is being run by the sheriff's office with a very strong support from the FBI. And that's where we're at right now with this investigation.
Well, that's right. I mean, why wasn't the FBI taking over from the start, and why isn't it taking over right now? I mean, is that the reason it's bungled? Because the sheriff is holding back information, which were all reports in the last few weeks. I want to be fair and I don't want to criticize, but I am just going to state it clearly that my understanding and people that I know in that area are extremely frustrated. And there does seem to be a lack of even support internally at their own sheriff's department. It's not really FBI versus the locals. It's almost internally there seems to be a lot of inner strife. A lot of people seem to have left, didn't necessarily respect the sheriff. But again, this is the time for everyone to come together. This is not the time for egos. This is not the time for accolades. And I think the other thing that's confusing is that there aren't wide open press conferences. Right now he's doing individual, media interviews. Yeah. It would be best if everyone was on the same page. He just has one, central press conference. Everyone can get the same data, the same information. Consistency is important. But let me rest assured, the law enforcement officers are working tirelessly behind the scenes. They are working day and night. There are literally hundreds of people from the FBI working tirelessly. That will continue. And right now it seems like, there's not a lot going on. The DNA didn't show up in the CODIS system. They're sending it off for genealogical testing. Maria, it takes one big break. All they need is one big break, and this case could potentially be solved. Yeah, unbelievable. Keep the faith, but keep praying. And we need to pray for Nancy. Nicole, we are now on day 19. Do you think she's still alive? Maria, I want to be hopeful, but
again, possible, yes. Probable, I just want to keep the hope. I just want to keep the hope alive.
Yeah, of course. Nicole, thanks so much. Great analysis as always. Nicole Parker. We'll see you soon, Nicole.